is a method for transferring photos onto a block of wood, just a little slab or a plaque. These are two examples that I did before. Picture of my neighbor's dog and my daughter when she got engaged. This is a piece of poplar. The method uses some stuff called matte gel medium, and it's actually, I think, the base that people use for paint. It's kind of a white gooey stuff that you would normally add dye to for paint. You can get it at the craft store. I bought this at a local store called Michael's. Ben Franklin, I think Joanne Fabrics, craft stores like that carry it, or you can buy it probably online. This was, I think, $8 for this little container of it. And I've prepared two slabs of wood, little plaques. This one is a piece of birch veneered plywood. It's only a ½ inch thick. And this actually is an MDF core piece of plywood. One of the things that I figured out in using like a piece of oak is that the oak is a little bit too open grained, and you can see that there was some big chunks of the photo that didn't stick because the grain was a little bit too rough. Also, the board warped pretty badly when I got this side wet with the medium and the other side stayed dry. It warped really bad. So that was an experiment in a piece of oak. And this piece on poplar actually came out a little bit better, and I think it's because it's a little bit softer. I also sanded the surfaces with some 220 grit sandpaper and blew them off with the air compressor so that there's no sandpaper residue or dust down inside the grain of the wood. So what I've done, I printed two photos. There's me and the wife at Mackinaw walking the bridge. And then this one is a flower picture from out in the yard, and I've put the words Carpe Diem, seize the day, on them. And you might notice that I have actually reversed this photo because we're going to be transferring it onto the paper. So you can print your photos. This was printed on a laser printer, but you have to tell the computer program to flip them for transfer. Or you can just grab a hold of one side and flip the thing over. I've printed this on normal 20-pound white paper, plain white paper. I've tried it on glossy paper and thicker paper like photo paper, but it makes it really hard to get the paper off. You'll see why when we shoot the rest of the video tomorrow after I set these things up. I've also softened the edges on the photos just a little bit in my photo program, and you may need to bump the contrast up just a little bit because when we transfer it onto the wood, the colors become a little bit muted. So some other things that you're going to need, I have a little paintbrush that I'm going to put the medium on with. A foam brush would work best, but I'm all out of foam brushes. And then you need a little, some kind of a squeegee thing. You could also use a credit card or something to squish the thing on because we're going to flatten things out a little bit. So I've prepared both of these pieces of wood and pre-cut them to size. So what I'm going to do is actually, I think this one goes on this piece of wood because it's a little bit bigger, and this one goes here. And what I'm going to do is actually look at the face of the photo first and figure out exactly where I want it on the paper, because I've made the block of wood just a tad smaller than the photo. I'm center it like that, and then I'm going to crease the edges just a little bit because I don't want to trim the photo exactly until I have it glued onto the surface of the wood. There, so now you can see I have little edges right there, and that's going to help me center the photo once I get the medium on there. And you may want to mark top and bottom, left and right, if your piece of wood has a little feature like a knot in it that you want to come around. But I don't think I have to worry about that with these. So flatten that out, and I'm going to lift this up and just set it right there, and do the same thing with this one. Find my centers, make sure it's nice and straight, crease the edges. So again, poplar would work well, pine works well, luan, something has to be probably at least a ½ inch thick to keep it from warping. I think maple might be all right because it's a nice hardwood and a white grain. Cedar might be all right. Might be just a little bit too soft to do cedar though. So there we go. Now what I'm going to do is to, of course, make sure that there's no bumps or anything on this wood. I'm going to open the medium. And I'm going to apply a generous coating of it on the wood. You'll notice I have a drop cloth down here because it does get a little bit sloppy and I didn't want to get it on my bench. I'll make sure that the entire thing is covered all the way out to the edges. And don't worry if there's a few lumps in there because we're going to be squeegeeing that out here in a minute. This stuff has a pretty long work time, so you don't have to worry about it drying before you get things done. Okay, almost done. And this stuff dries perfectly clear. You can see that it goes on white, but it dries really clear. I have a bucket of water with a little rag in it too that I can throw my paintbrush, and I'm also going to wring this rag out right now for cleanup because it does ooze out the edges a little bit and we'll want to clean that up. So I'm going to take my photo now and get it lined up, and now you can see why having those little folds on there is handy. It helps you to line the thing up right where you had it before. A couple of presses just to make sure it's there. Now we're going to start at the center with this little squeegee, and this is just a little plastic squeegee that came with something else that I had. And I'm going to squish it out to the sides like this, starting from the center, and pull it out. Now what I don't want to do, I don't want to press too hard, because if you press too hard you're going to squeeze all of the glue out, and I think that's one of the things that happened with this piece of oak. When I pressed really hard, I scraped all of the glue out of those spots and there wasn't enough to hold it in place. So just going to squeegee this a little bit, make sure that it's all even and there are no bubbles. I'll do that same thing with this second one. Even my edges out. Yep, all the bubbles out and all the excess glue so it's nice and even. Again, don't go crazy with pressure. There we go. Now, if we pick this up and look, there's a little bit of ooze on the edges, but that's not too bad. And I'm just going to put a paper towel down on this other block of wood. Put that down on top of it, face down, and I'm going to clamp it. Now if you don't have a set of clamps, then you might want to use, just set something heavy, set a book or a brick or something heavy on top of it. I have these nice heavy-duty clamps. If you didn't have one of those big fancy clamps, you could even just use a spring clamp like this. Just something to provide a little bit of pressure to hold it in place while it sets up. Now what we're going to do is let this dry for about 24 hours, and we'll come back tomorrow and remove this, and you'll see the magic start to happen tomorrow. Okay, I have removed the clamps from our projects here, and I actually let these set out without the clamped board on top of them for another couple hours because this still felt a little bit cool to the touch, and I thought maybe it might still have a little bit of moisture in it. So what we're going to do now is we have to soak this paper in water in order to get the paper to come off. And you need to resist the urge to just peel the paper off like a big sticker, because if you start doing that, you'll start peeling the image off. And so we're going to have to wait on that. And I still leave this overhang edge on there. And this one I've already soaked it in water, and I laid this wet cloth on it. And so we're going to do that with this one too. And I'm just going to take a little bit of water out of my bucket here and smear it on here, and you'll see the water starts to soak through the paper. And I think this is one of the reasons that you have to use regular paper, not like a glossy paper or even a magazine or something like that wouldn't work real well, because I think the glossiness prevents this water from soaking through. So there, I've just put a generous coat of water on there, and I'm going to lay this damp towel on top of it just to let it soak in a little bit. Now, some other directions online talk about using a towel to get this paper residue off, but I think using a towel is a little bit too rough, and I think you're better off just doing it with your fingers. But now that this is wet, you actually can start to peel the paper off a little bit, and you'll see that it's leaving behind the bottom layer where the image was printed. So there's just this real fine tissue of paper that's left on the image. And you can start to see the image kind of coming through there just a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is make sure that this stays wet. I'll zoom in there so you can see it just a little bit better. Make sure that this stays wet. And I'm just going to use my hands to roll around a little bit, and you'll see that paper starts to pill up. Of course, my table's got a little squeak to it. That little squeaky sound you hear is the wheels on my table squeaking. And as it pills up, I don't want to be too rough with it, because if you're a little bit too rough with it, then you'll start taking the image off of the wood. So just be patient and rub it around like that. And if you get too many of those pieces on there, then you can just kind of dip it in your bucket and rinse those pieces off. That gets a little bit more water on it. And just be patient and slowly work to get all this stuff off. Peel that stuff off the edges. Continue working it very gently until no more paper pills up. And I can feel just a little bit of paper pilling up a little bit under my fingers. But you can also see that I'm starting to come through in a couple little spots. And I don't want to remove the image from the wood. So after it is barely pilling up a little bit, and you can see like right there, we're coming through just a little bit, and over here, over my hat, or over her hat, it's kind of starting to come through a little bit. So we're going to kind of stop doing this. I'm going to give it a good rinse with this wet towel to get those chunks off. I can pat it dry with a towel a little bit, and if the image is still just a little bit foggy, don't worry about it, because we're going to spray clear polyurethane over the top of this, and so that'll help brighten it up just a little bit. And also, once it dries, we can kind of brush these little fuzzies off of there so that they won't be on there. And we're just going to do that again with the second one. I should also note that this fuzzy stuff on the side, after this dries, I'm just going to take a sanding block and knock those edges off. Okay, these have been drying out in the sun for a little while, and you can see that they're still pretty hazy and fuzzy, like they've still got just a little teeny bit of paper fiber on them. A lot of people would say, oh, you've got to keep rubbing that until it comes off, but the image then starts coming off. And if you want a really rustic look to it, then yeah, you can keep taking that paper fiber off, but you're going to start losing some of the image and showing the wood through. But if you put polyurethane over the top of this, and some people use Mod Podge instead, but since I'm a woodworker, I have water-based polyurethane, and I have some spray polyurethane too. As soon as you get this surface wet, you can see if I just lick my thumb and put a little bit right there, the image starts popping through and you don't see any of these fibers at all. So what I'm going to do right now is just sand the edges of these a little bit so that that paper on the edges starts falling off. And it helps to kind of clean up the edge a little bit, a little bit of glue that happens to still be on there. Put a little teeny chamfer on the edge. Also takes any splinters off that might have arisen from the watering process that we did. Okay, the edges of both of them are sanded and ready for a clear coat. And I've actually already sprayed just a little bit on the back. I sprayed some clear polyurethane, gloss polyurethane on the back sides. And I'm going to spray the front side of one of them with polyurethane, and the other one I'm going to use some water-based polyurethane and brush it on. I think it would look a little bit better. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that all of the little loose fuzzies are off of it. Already shaking up my can. We'll use the spray polyurethane for this one. And you'll see that it's a pretty foggy, fuzzy picture because the surface is still fuzzy. But as soon as I spray this polyurethane on, you see the image pop through. Looks a lot better. And has kind of a rustic look. I like the way that the edges are faded around the edges. That kind of fades off and you can see the wood beneath it. So I'm going to let that dry just a little bit. And while that's drying over here, I'm going to try some water-based polyurethane. This is actually a Varathane polyurethane that left over from a hardwood flooring project, so it's really good hard stuff. Should provide a lot of protection and goes on pretty thick. Anytime you use polyurethane like this, especially water-based polyurethane, you don't want to shake it, you just want to stir it gently because you don't want to introduce air bubbles into it. Use a good bristle brush. I put it into a clean container so that I don't have any fuzzies down inside the bowl. And we're just going to brush it on and put probably 2 or 3 coats on. And this picture, I know still looks just a little bit fuzzy, but that's because when I printed it with a photo effect so that it would look like a painting. I'm just going to get the drips off the edges there. You can see that that has made the image pop out pretty nicely. So I'm going to let that dry. But this one that we sprayed is probably about ready for another coat. Well, maybe not. It's still just a little bit tacky, it looks like. It's gloss polyurethane, so it's kind of hard to tell when it dries, especially on an image like that. But that's basically the process. We're going to put a few more coats on. I'll put a sawtooth hanger on the back side of it. If you have any questions about the process, you can put them down in the description. I'll have a link to where you can buy some of the matte gel medium so you can try it yourself. So I've got 4 projects that I've done now, and learning more on each one of them. I think maybe by the time I get 10 projects into it, I'll have mastered it, because I certainly haven't yet. Enjoy the process.